Welcome to Politics here on France 24. After the war in Libya, the crisis of the euro, France's attention is finally shifting back to bread and butter issue as the presidential campaign begins in earnest. The social issues, of course, first and foremost unemployment, are back on the front burner. So with me to discuss how this will affect the presidential campaign and how it is already affecting it is Ana Navarro Pedro, who is the Paris correspondent of the Portuguese magazine Visão. Also on the set is Michel Guilbault, who is the general manager of the MEDEF, which is the Bosses Union, a pro-business organization. And from the Force Ouvrière trade union, Raphael Nedzinski. Welcome to all of you. So in recent days, there's been a lot of controversy around a company ferrying between France and Great Britain known as SeaFrance, and many see this as a way into how the campaign will shape up on those very sensitive social issues.
Angry at the outcome, workers in France's cross-channel ferry service lash out at the court's decision to ground them.
All we're asking is for the funding to keep us in jobs. It's going to cost a lot more to make people redundant than to keep them working. Oh, how beautiful France is, how beautiful, marvellous.
Dozens of workers made the trip from the northern tip of France to Paris to highlight their plight. SeaFrance has been in troubled economic waters for many months. Previous offers to buy out the firm were rejected by Paris's commercial court, one on competition grounds and another because it would lead to too many redundancies. But today, everyone must go.
The immediate consequence is the loss of over 800 jobs, and that's without counting our British colleagues. So it's 1,010 people in total who will be let go over the next 15 days. That means 1,000 more unemployed in the Calais region, thanks to greed.
Nicolas Sarkozy quickly announced that SeaFrance staff would not be forgotten and that the government would work to find a solution. Indeed, the workers here say they will use the election year to keep up the pressure.
We'll stay mobilised. We'll make sure that we won't be forgotten and that will stop them winning the elections. They deserve nothing else. They are destroying France.
Unemployment claims in France are at a 12-year high. And in this election year, the economy is top of voters' concerns. Saving or losing jobs comes at a price.
So, Raphael Nedzinski, let me begin with you as a member of a trade union. Those conflicts, those social conflicts happen all the time, but when it happens just before a campaign, things are different because even the president intervenes.
Well, first of all, obviously, we are here in a dramatic situation since, as it was said, I mean, more than 800 jobs are at stake in a region where unemployment is very high. So, obviously, I mean, that is an example, but maybe we could find other ones. The reality is indeed that today, I mean, we have around 10% unemployment. We have about more than 8 million poor people. So, obviously, the social situation, it will be still a major subject in the campaign. And I think, you know, there is still more and more anger amongst our members and among workers. So, yes, I do believe that, I mean, that's a major concern for everybody. I mean, we have problem with purchasing power. So all that, obviously, I mean, will be a point on which I think voters will decide for these elections.
Michel Guilbault, as a member of a pro-business organization, what's your reaction to politicians jumping into what's supposed to be more or less a free market economy?
Maybe I would make two short comments. First, saying that SeaFrance is a very specific case. It's not really due to economic slowing down. It's due to a historical case where there are quite complicated steps, complicated situation. People have some difficulty to understand what really occurred. There are discussions among unions. It's a state-owned company, but we do believe there is a possibility to have profitable running of shipping operations through the channel. So we are, of course, very sorry that a global solution was not found before the court this week. But we do believe something is possible, and we think, of course, of the workers and on what we could do on this specific situation. But of course, more globally, the opening of 2012 is marked by uncertainty. We are quite worried with the evolution of the economic situation. The activity did not collapse, but of course we know that in Europe and worldwide, the economy is slowing down, and we might have some cases of difficulties in the economy, in small and medium-sized enterprises. Everybody has to work on it.
Should the government jump in like it seems to be jumping in? Is this the role of the government?
Economy and social matters have always been at the heart of concern of people, at the heart of concern of politicians.
So you don't have a problem with that?
After, it's a question of how we do it. It's a question of media focusing at such step or specific episode, I would say. But yeah, we have no problem with the intervention of politicians. And of course, a campaign will make it even stronger.
You're smiling, Ananda.
Yes, because it's a state-owned enterprise, isn't it? SeaFrance is a state-owned enterprise. So it's normal. The state is the boss. So it's normal that it's supposed to jump in. Secondly, it's a case of mismanagement, a screaming case of mismanagement. SeaFrance. We've been reading reports of what has been happening inside the enterprise, and it seems to have developed some kind of, I would say, almost rogue management, both by one trade union that is being pointed by press, and I'm saying this here, most journalists cannot go and really investigate this case. There is silence, a law of silence within the enterprise and with almost all of the workers. But I mean, some people must have been taking advantage of this situation until it collapsed. It went public and collapsed because it couldn't go any farther. But some people must have been taking profit of it. And I don't think the management could have ignored it. If it wasn't participating, couldn't have ignored it. So yes, there is a responsibility by the management and there is a responsibility by the state. And I wonder if there is not a criminal case in here and if it shouldn't go to court. But of course, politics jumped in, as usual, in France. And of course, it's being put up, a rogue case of management is being put up as a case of political power to save jobs during campaign presidential election year. And this is quite surrealistic for us abroad to see how things can, get out of proportion, get out of, I'm not saying get out of proportion because of the loss of jobs. That is absolutely dramatic for everybody.
The level of attention. But
the level of attention and the way it's being studied right now, this case, there were problems, and I believe there should be a police case studying it.
Rafał Nizinski, beyond that, is this a strategy by the trade unions, saying, we know it's a campaign, so we have to push some of the issues more into the limelight than usually because that's our leverage? Well,
the first thing I want to say is that once a politician, a government says, I'm going to save that company, I mean, they should be very careful about what they're saying. I mean, it's not just a question of putting money in a company. I mean, if a company is in trouble, then you have to have a business plan that is going to help that company to take over. And in this case, people were talking just about money, so it's not that simple. And I'm not sure the government can't save one company after the other one. That would be too simple.
Especially when the coffers are empty.
Exactly. But on the other hand, the government has to create the better general conditions. I mean, you mentioned the economic situation of the country. Now, what can the government do, and what is the government prepared to do to favor growth in this country? I mean, that's an issue, because if a government just makes short-term promises saying, I'm going to save this or that company, we've had in the past with this government, but also with other governments, cases where promises were not kept. So I think still, government should be very careful about what they're doing, especially in this case, because I think they could be proved to be very wrong. I mean, you shouldn't promise things you can't keep up. The only way a government can save a company is to say, I'm going to nationalize it. But I mean, that's not possible in a market economy.
We do believe
then I'm saying, I mean,
development of a private ownership of activities of that case.
Just I'm saying that if you want to save a company, it's not just a question of money. You have to have a business plan. You cannot force people to have a business plan. But of course, a government can encourage, put people together, have a discussion, help them in terms of training of people. It can do a number of things. But I think sometimes in a campaign, too simple answers, I mean, are not going to be very convincing. That's what you're going to
get, no, during the campaign. Don't you think you're going to get the government saying, I'm going to save that company, please vote for me?
Well, again, no companies will be in problems in the future.
I can tell you some will be.
When you have 800 workers that do have, I mean, they might have no job in a few, and for the moment, that's their main worry. Of course, you feel concerned with that. But social matters in the campaign will be of a wider scope. I mean, it's a very specific case. You know that we will meet as social partners in a social summit on the 18th of January with President Sarkozy. He decided to have quite an important political event, or at least a term with us, and we will speak of more structural matters like competitiveness, like the way we should improve the capability of business to improve their competitiveness compared to our competitors in Europe. It's relying to the financing of social protection. That is the main subject that will be, of course, discussed in the campaign. It's not only a question of individual enterprise.
But some people are saying, Nicolas Sarkozy now is convening a social summit. He's presenting one reform after the other, 100 days from the presidential election. And some people are wondering, why suddenly this urgency? Okay, the crisis is here, but maybe there are some other afterthoughts.
Because you haven't seen in France the full impact of the crisis as we are seeing it elsewhere in Europe. You don't know where it is. You still have a very good social security system that allows people to get through it. There are forces at work in this country trying to bring down that social security system, which has problems of financing, of course. But there is a real ideological clash in this country, and historical one as well, trying to change the organization and I would say even the philosophy of this society and the way it's organized and financed. And Nicolas Sarkozy knows that the beginning of the impact of the crisis might come to France before May. And he knows that people will be very upset and very frightened because you really don't know what is happening in other countries like mine or Greece or Italy or Great Britain for that matter. And so that is the big problem. And because he knows that by the end of the day, after the euro, as you said in the beginning, after the euro, after Libya, Syria, whatever, people will be worried about how they are going to get through the month, how much money they're going to have in their pockets, are they going to be able to pay the studies for their children. And it's coming down to this in some of the richest economies in the world. It's coming down to basic poor people problems. And he knows that this might weigh very much on his campaign.
Right. And sometimes politicians, the way they have dealt with social conflicts has had an impact. We remember then Prime Minister Lionel Jospin, socialist prime minister. He went outside a factory, it was back in 2001. He was confronted by a member of a trade union, and he was mostly speechless and did not properly respond. And many people think that his behavior that day showed that he was deaf and that he could not really handle the issue. So politicians have to be very, very careful about what they do.
Absolutely, but on the other hand, first of all, I mean, one thing one has to say about Louis, that in fact virtually all workers got a job, so solutions were fine to that one. On the other hand, I think to a certain extent he was honest, but I don't think it helped him in his statement. The one thing I want to say is, I mean, about the social summit we're going to have. I mean, every week the subject of this summit is changing. I mean, in the beginning, it was said it would be a summit on unemployment. We had doubts about that because if a government calls in as to the summit on unemployment, it has to be able to put some money on the table. Whereas everybody knows that the state and the government doesn't have any euro to put on the table on employment. So we didn't see, what exactly we're going to discuss. So obviously we've seen that as a communication exercise and more than that. Now, because of the campaigns accelerating, we may be going to talk about the social VAT. We're going to talk about working time. We maybe talk about competitiveness, which it's not. It's obviously there are social consequences, but I don't think that in a meeting that is going to last 2 hours, we're going to solve anything about competitiveness because it's quite complicated.
Isn't this very French in a way? The president calls a meeting, everyone comes in. We're going to talk about this, this, and this.
There is something that might seem a bit strange, but there is a feeling of urgency, not only on the short-term economic perspective. We know that the prospects for growth are low. We are expecting a few difficulties in enterprises, as I already said. And we want to be ready for any case. We are working with unions to reactivate tools like partial activity, compensation for enterprise. But the feeling of urgency is also regarding the structural question of competitiveness. You know that we have a very strong deficit for foreign trade. The global result for 2011 will be very low compared to Germany, 150 billion euros as a positive result for their foreign trade. In France, it's a deficit of 75 billion euros. So how do we look at that?
When I was studying economics at university, we already had studying the case of France and Germany. France was systematically in deficit.
But it's increasing. It's increasing. In 10 years' time, the shift has become incredible. I mean, and there is a feeling. The entrepreneurs feel as much worried as, well, maybe it's hard to hear, but they are as much worried as workers. I mean, they feel that in 2012 they might face strong difficulties. Okay. So they are expecting something to be done no matter the presidential term, I would say.
Okay, we have to end it here. We'll have probably other occasions because social issues, as we just saw, will be on the menu of the presidential campaign. I want to thank all of you for coming today and all of you for watching this edition of Politics here on France 24.